Dennis Rader, the infamous BTK killer. Rader terrorized Wichita, Kansas, for more than 3 decades, carrying out a series of gruesome murders between 1974 and 1991. The moniker BTK stood for bind, torture, kill, which aptly described the killer's heinous methods. Rader's crimes began in 1974 when he targeted 4 members of the Otero family. His modus operandi involved breaking into the homes of his victims, often binding them with shoelaces and torturing them before taking their lives. The BTK killer reveled in taunting law enforcement and the media, sending letters detailing his crimes to local newspapers and even leaving clues at crime scenes. The community lived in fear as Rader continued his reign of terror, selecting victims seemingly at random. His next known murders occurred in 1977 when he targeted Shirley Vian, a mother of 5. Over the years, Rader struck fear into the hearts of Wichita residents, remaining elusive and leaving behind a series of unsolved homicides. In the early 1980s, the BTK killer went dormant, leaving investigators puzzled about his sudden disappearance. However, in 2004, more than a decade after his last known murder, Rader resurfaced, reigniting the fear that had gripped Wichita for so many years. Rader resumed sending letters to the media, law enforcement, and even his victims' families. In one letter, he included photographs of a crime scene that hadn't been made public, further unsettling the community. The letters served not only as a means of communication but also as a means for Rader to boast about his crimes and exert control over the narrative. Despite his cunning and ability to evade capture for so long, Rader's arrogance ultimately led to his downfall. In 2004, he sent a floppy disk to the police containing metadata that could be traced back to a computer at the Christ Lutheran Church. Investigators connected the church computer to Dennis Rader, who was the president of the church council. On February 25, 2005, Dennis Rader was arrested at his home. During subsequent interrogations, he confessed to 10 murders and provided chilling details about his crimes. In 2006, Rader pleaded guilty to the murders and was sentenced to 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. The BTK killer's case is a stark reminder of the terror one individual can inflict on a community and the painstaking efforts required to bring such a prolific and elusive serial killer to justice. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, a reign of terror descended upon the San Francisco Bay Area, leaving a community gripped by fear and a series of gruesome murders that would remain unsolved for decades. The shadowy figure responsible for these heinous crimes would come to be known as the Zodiac Killer, a moniker derived from the cryptic letters and symbols he sent to newspapers and authorities. The saga began on December 20, 1968, when teenagers David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were shot and killed in Vallejo, California. The Zodiac's terrifying spree continued with the shooting of Darlene Ferrin and Michael Mageau in July 1969. Ferrin succumbed to her injuries, but Mageau survived, offering a description of the hooded assailant. What set the Zodiac Killer apart from other criminals was his penchant for theatrics. He initiated a disturbing pattern of correspondence, sending a series of cryptic letters to various newspapers, including the San Francisco Chronicle. In these letters, the killer claimed responsibility for the murders and threatened more bloodshed if his messages were not published. The Zodiac adopted a chilling symbol as his signature, a cross circle that would become synonymous with his crimes. In 1969, the Zodiac Killer sent a particularly baffling letter containing a complex cipher. Fearing that the code could reveal his identity, the killer teased that it held the key to unlocking the mystery of who he was. The cryptic puzzle became a nationwide obsession and eventually was cracked by a determined husband and wife team of amateur codebreakers. However, the deciphered message did little to unveil the true identity of the killer, leaving investigators and the public alike frustrated. The Zodiac continued to taunt authorities, escalating his violence. In September 1969, he attacked a young couple at Lake Berryessa, stabbing them multiple times. The Zodiac left behind a taunting message on their car door and wore a hood featuring his distinct cross-circle symbol. Despite extensive investigations and numerous suspects, the Zodiac Killer managed to elude capture, creating an atmosphere of pervasive fear and paranoia throughout the Bay Area. The killer's final confirmed communication came in 1974, and as abruptly as he had surfaced, the Zodiac seemingly vanished. Over the years, various suspects emerged, each with their own set of circumstantial evidence and theories. However, none were definitively proven to be the Zodiac Killer. The case has left an indelible mark on criminal history, spawning countless books, documentaries, and investigations. The legacy of the Zodiac Killer endures as one of the greatest unsolved mysteries in American criminal annals, a chilling testament to the elusiveness of a murderer who sowed terror and confusion, leaving behind a legacy of fear that has persisted for decades. In the mid-1970s, a shadowy figure emerged in the suburbs of California, terrorizing communities and leaving a trail of fear in his wake. Initially known as the East Area Rapist due to his string of sexual assaults in the Sacramento area, and later dubbed the Original Night Stalker as he escalated to murder, the mysterious offender would eventually be recognized as the infamous Golden State Killer. The first known attacks occurred in the Sacramento area between 1976 and 1978. The perpetrator, clad in a ski mask and armed with a weapon, would break into the homes of his victims, often couples, and subject them to prolonged periods of terror. His methodical approach involved extensive surveillance, where he would stalk his targets for weeks, learning their routines and vulnerabilities. As the East Area Rapist's reign of terror continued, his crime scenes extended southwards into the San Francisco Bay Area. He continued his modus operandi of breaking into homes, restraining and assaulting his victims, and leaving behind a traumatized community. Law enforcement faced mounting pressure to apprehend the elusive perpetrator, who seemed to taunt them with phone calls before or after his attacks. The East Area Rapist's crimes took a darker turn when he escalated to murder in Southern California. His victims now not only faced sexual assault and burglary, but also the ultimate horror of losing their lives. Despite efforts to connect the crimes, investigators struggled to piece together a comprehensive profile of the offender. As the 1980s dawned, the attacks suddenly ceased. The Golden State Killer seemingly vanished, leaving investigators with a cold trail and a community scarred by the memories of his reign of terror. For decades, the Golden State Killer case remained one of the most perplexing and notorious unsolved mysteries in American criminal history. Families of the victims, as well as the traumatized survivors, lived with the haunting uncertainty of not knowing the identity of the man who had wreaked havoc on their lives. The breakthrough in the case came in the form of advancements in forensic genealogy. In 2018, investigators turned to DNA evidence collected from crime scenes and utilized public genealogy databases to identify potential relatives of the perpetrator. This groundbreaking technique eventually led them to Joseph James D'Angelo, a former police officer who had never been on the radar of investigators. In a dramatic turn of events, Joseph James D'Angelo was arrested in April 2018, ending his decades-long run of freedom. In June 2020, D'Angelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of first-degree murder and numerous other charges related to his reign of terror as the Golden State Killer. The case of the Golden State Killer stands as a testament to the power of perseverance, technological advancements, and the dogged determination of law enforcement to bring a serial offender to justice. The survivors and families of the victims, though forever scarred, finally found a measure of closure as the man behind the mask faced the consequences of his horrifying crimes.